Welcome, everyone. Episode 117 of the Talking Friars podcast, a special one today. I'm excited for this one. It's been probably a little less than a year in the making. Kevin Acee, San Diego Union Tribune, Padres beat writer, joins the show. Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time and finally getting this going.
Thanks for having me. I do apologize that it took so long.
No, it's perfect. This is a perfect time to do it because we're not really doing much of really anything right now, sadly. You'd probably be at spring training right now at the usual time?
Yeah, I think about 3 weeks ago. And so
Yeah.
getting a little antsy. Mostly I'm just sad that people don't get to watch, listen, read about, enjoy baseball, in particular in San Diego Padres baseball.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely looking to get back to the ballpark, and hopefully we can get some type of spring training going here. Let's just start with the lockout, obviously. It's an interesting question for me. Vice Chairman Ron Fowler representing Major League Baseball in their labor union, but then you have Chairman Peter Seidler. He's willing to spend $640 million on the left side of his infield. So it's just an interesting, I guess, dynamic in that front office. And I'm curious what you've heard. Is Fowler in any way at odds at all with Seidler, or is it only because he's just representing Major League Baseball at this point?
I think if you had to go either or, it's closer to what you just said. I mean, because Ron Fowler, or for that matter, Dick Monfort, the chairman of the Rockies, or anyone else was at that table representing Major League Baseball, doesn't mean that they're one of the hardline owners. I mean, one of the mistakes that we all make is to paint owners like with this broad brush that 30 owners, they're all bad, or whatever, 30 owners, they're all good. Or on the other side, all the players are on the same side, and all the players have only good demands and the owners have only bad demands. I mean, absolutes are foolish. So no, and the evidence I'll give you, because I can't speak for them, and they're not talking, there's not been a single owner that I know of that has spoken on the record about the lockout or any of the labor issues. Certainly not recently. The evidence I can give you is the spending began under Ron Fowler, when Ron Fowler was the chairman. That you brought in Eric Hosmer. Whatever you think of Eric Hosmer makes a lot of money. I think that's part of most people's issue with Eric Hosmer. Manny Machado was signed. And obviously then the big splurge in August of 2020, that's under Ron Fowler's stewardship. And certainly what under Peter Seidler, AJ Preller did last winter. So there's the evidence that the Padres are one of the teams that can be held apart to a large extent from the rest of the owners.
And I think I'll go to this next question with Seidler. I think it was obviously a good look that he put out that letter after the agreement obviously didn't happen. But what do you think of other owners not really putting out anything?
Well, right. I think that I agree with you in terms of that was a good move. Seemed like a no-brainer, actually, but certainly a lot of other teams did not make the same gesture. And also, I'll point out that the Padres are doing automatic refunds. Other teams, some are not. They're not doing refunds. They're doing credits. Other teams are waiting for fans to request refunds before giving them. But the Padres, it is my understanding, and please, if in 30 days you don't have your refund, let me know. But I have no reason to doubt that this will be the case, that if the lockout were to go on that long, within 30 days, any tickets unused, those 6 games at home that were canceled, that those will be refunded to people that had tickets for those games. So I think that's a big gesture. And I do think that it speaks to the character of Peter Seidler, Eric Grupner, and how they do business.
Yeah, because my family has season tickets, have had it since I was 13 years old, and they got an email saying, my parents did that, obviously, that opening day game, you'll be able to use, or they'll give you another ticket to get to the next or to opening day whenever that happens this season. So yeah, definitely a good move there. Moving to AJ Preller, he obviously hired two of the guys that didn't really have managing experience with Jace Tingler and Andy Green, but then obviously pivoted. Pretty much felt like he had to pivot to an experienced manager just based on the inexperienced manager thing not happening or not working out the first two times. What my question to you is, do you think that AJ truly wanted to go the Bob Melvin route, or was it more of an ownership thing saying, hey, if think outside the box here if you want to in terms of the experienced manager thing like he did with Melvin, but it needs to be an experienced manager?
I think a little bit of both. AJ Preller has demonstrated that he's going to do his own thing, right? And that's going to be counter sometimes, if not often, to what other people might do or what the rest of us think is smart. And sometimes it works out to some extent, and sometimes it doesn't. But I do believe, and this is educated speculation, that Peter Seidler was heavily involved in the direction that they would go.
Right. Yeah. I think, and do you agree with this, that ownership, especially at this point when they've let AJ do that with the managers the first two times, that they should definitely have a say the way that how close this team should be to contending on paper?
Well, I think that ownership should always have a say because they're the ones putting in the millions of dollars.
Right.
AJ Preller is making millions of dollars on his new contract. So the owners, who, by the way, are also making millions of dollars, the owners are the ones who have put in all of this capital, and they haven't had to, put in cash. And I think that's a huge deal. And it would have actually been foolish for the owners to not be involved heavily.
Yeah. All right. So I had on Christopher Mad Dog Russo earlier this week, and he told me that Blake Snell and Yu Darvish aren't good enough to win a championship. Do the Padres think that they need more frontline starting pitching, or is Nick Martinez pretty much what they're going to get at the back end of that rotation, and they want to focus more on offense?
Well, the back end of the rotation, I don't think should ever be confused with like frontline starting pitcher. But right. I know what you're saying. That it's, I mean, you got a lot of good teams that they're putting out their 4 and 5 starters is not somebody that you were really excited about before the start of the season. Here's the Padres' problem: they've spent a lot of money on Blake Snell and Yu Darvish. So if Kris, who by the way, his signature is to have really hot takes, right? And if he's right, they're in trouble because they can't really afford much more, right? You're going to pay Joe Musgrove too, who, by the way, was like, I believe, undisputably their best pitcher last year. Where you need more offense. Where are you getting any sort of money to get another quote unquote frontline starter? So, man, you better hope he's wrong.
Yeah, because the injuries last year, obviously, I come with, I don't know if you come with this opinion or this statement or just thought. Last year, obviously, the whole rotation except Musgrove ended up having some sort of injury. Some were bigger than others. Some were pretty much season ending. Some were only smaller injuries. But I just don't see that happening 2 years in a row. Do you think that's safe to assume, or it's just hard to kind of imagine that everyone's going to be able to stay healthy?
It's a great point you make, and I would think that I'd lean toward you being right that it wouldn't go like that. However, I don't think that any Padres fan can responsibly assume that things are going to go well for this franchise. I'm not saying they're cursed or anything like that, but no trophies in the cabinet. So there's not a whole lot of playoff appearances in the cabinet. So I don't see how we can assume that. And let's look at, the reality is there should be some concern about Yu Darvish. Now, do I think that he is exactly the kind of pitcher that can, over the final 2 years of this contract, be dominant? Absolutely, I do. But let's take a look at history and take a look at last year, take a look at his age. And there's something to prove there. So I think that there are a lot of questions, and you're right about that rotation. I mean, obviously Blake Snell, end of the season, I think it was sustained long enough, his success, for us to buy into it. Joe Musgrove, I believe that's who he is, what he did last year. And there were a lot of injuries. And I think that that's something maybe we overlooked because of Snell's, struggles early, because of Paddock's struggles early, because of what Darvish, he was out there pitching even though he was injured, and his struggles. We overlooked that there was, Adrian Morejon made 2 starts. And Adrian Morejon was, that's a pretty good number 4 or 5 starter, whatever you call him. So injuries were huge, but that shouldn't make us necessarily feel any. I guess it would make us feel better because, like I said, I agree with you, but it shouldn't give us a whole lot of confidence about this year. There's a lot to prove for these guys.
How about someone who I think is probably going to end up having to fight for a rotation spot with Chris Paddack? I'm a believer in him still. Obviously, he had the UCL injury last year. For me, if I was Chris Paddack, my mentality going into the season would be, look, I just go pitch. Don't worry about the whole Cowboy thing. Don't worry about being, what you were in 2019. What do I have to lose right now? I have to fight for a rotation spot. It's not going to be given to me. And I don't care what anyone's going to say. I literally just have to go pitch, give it my all, or else I might end up being traded or might end up not being in the rotation or being in a big role for the Padres this year. So do you think that Paddack should have that same mentality? And do you think he has an upper hand at the 5 spot, or is it someone like Morejon?
I'd agree with you about his mindset. And far more importantly, I believe that Chris Paddack would agree with you about that mindset. And actually, he expressed that last year. And there was evidence that he, did that last year, and then with the elbow issue. So first will be his health. And my understanding is that he'll be ready to go, but I haven't been able to really kind of lock down where he's at. So I think that we still have to put a little question mark there. Morejon won't be ready until middle of the season at the earliest, or who knows when the middle of the season will be, but summer at the earliest. So yeah, Paddack would, I think, have the upper hand, but he's in, you want to talk about prove it. He's in prove it mode for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't think that the leash for Chris Paddack would be as long as it would be for some of the other guys who we say have, stuff to prove. So yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. All right. Let's move to the elephant in the room, Eric Hosmer. I have to ask, how high on the priority list is getting rid of that contract and trading Hosmer whenever this lockout ends?
It's high up there. I will say this, that all moves, it's interesting. I should say all. Most moves are contingent on possibility of other moves coming through. So there's scenarios in which they keep Eric Hosmer and they believe that they are good. However, it's just a lot of money. It's just a lot of money to give a guy who has not produced. And as I've written, that they would like to move him, and that's just fact. And I can't handicap it because I just don't know what the market's going to be like. And I honestly can't tell you, what are the Padres willing to give up? Is it Robert Hassel as a part of that?
Right.
There has not been any indication that that's what they're willing to do.
That's my question.
Understanding, is that they kind of need to. And AJ Preller has given up a lot of prospect capital. There's just not that many of those prospects to be able to entice other teams with.
Yeah, that's the big question. Two questions. How much are they willing to give up, or how much are they willing to pay in that Hosmer $56 million remaining on the contract? And are they willing to part with someone other than Gore or Campusano to get a deal done?
I think they're at the point now where they would pay a decent chunk of that because, savings is savings, right? Mm-hmm. But then obviously you've got to say, well, so how much are you giving up in prospects? How much are you giving up in money? And I mean, I just really can't handicap that. And of course, the Padres will tell you that, oh, we're fine with Eric Hosmer. Yeah, okay, sure. Both can be true. You can want to get rid of him and not get rid of him. And then what else are you going to say that they want him there? And, there really is a belief that guy brings a lot to the team. He has not brought the value in the Padres' opinion, and I think it's difficult to argue. He has not brought the on-field value that they expected when they gave him that contract.
Yeah. I have another interesting question regarding Hosmer. You obviously reported this offseason that the Padres front office had given up on Hosmer being the player that they envisioned him being. When did they do you have a date or a day or a timeline when they actually started, thinking that?
When they started thinking that was
let's go here. We'll say, let's do this then. When they reached the conclusion that this happened, was it when you reported?
No, this is bad. I mean, I remember the one story that I flat out said that, and it was well before that, but I think a lot of us wrote about it, that in the summer, it became clear to everyone in the organization, pretty much, that there was a large chunk of the baseball operations department that was over Eric Hosmer. And so there you go. This thing is, as you said, it's become the giant elephant in the room, and we'll see where it goes.
And so you're, just to clarify, the summer of 2021, last season, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, you've been hearing about that for longer than that,
right?
But I think it's a pretty big statement,
yeah.
and I don't just get to throw out statements all the time. Like I got to be pretty responsible about this, and so.
Exactly.
But when you got to the point where it was a consensus, and it was actually pretty harsh, was last summer.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's see.
2020, this guy was pretty good. Now, a lot of people were pretty good in 2020, but it would have been kind of silly for the Padres to have been down on Eric Hosmer in 2020.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Moving to this offseason, whenever this lockout, they decide to reach an agreement, could you rank, from what you've gathered, who the Padres would want most post-lockout among the following three outfielders: Seiya Suzuki, Kris Bryant, and Nick Castellanos?
Seiya Suzuki, I believe, but I don't know that this guy hasn't made up his mind where he's going to go, like to the Giants. I don't know that. But in terms of what they believe he can be and the cost, that's a guy who really fits. Yes, heard talks with both, or discussions about both Bryant and Castellanos. Do not know the extent of those discussions, and both of them are going to be really pricey. Michael Conforto is another one I think you could throw in there because of what he kind of season that they believe that he could have, that he was expected to have last year, and the price also. But I do believe, based on the cash that owners have put into this organization, the cash they have on hand, what they're already invested in, and it can't turn back now, that there is the money to get any of those guys. I mean, I don't know how you could argue with Kris Bryant, in particular, the number of positions he plays.
Right.
I mean, wow, that would absolutely be, to me, the coup. Now, none of these guys are going to be cheap, and there's still a part of me that says, man, the competition out there is going to be so fierce. What are they going to do? It's going to be a fascinating week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, month into the season. I mean, this is going to be such an unprecedented year. Gosh, we're seeing that for the second time in 3 years. This is going to be such an unprecedented year. Man, are people making deals into the second month of the season? I mean, it's basically like the trade deadline extended. It's going to be a lot of fun and also kind of crazy.
Yeah, Kris Bryant of those big three, or you can include Conforto in that, is who I'd go with. Not I'm not even talking about his San Diego connection, but his versatility. He's already won. Now, with Bryant and Castellanos, obviously the big two there, who do you think is going to come cheaper?
I honestly, I don't know. I think it's pretty
Okay.
close. I do, but I have no idea, and that's because I mean I haven't got those numbers or from people that I would actually say, oh yeah, they know. And does anyone? I mean, we do these projections and then they're often very off, and especially this year, I there's just a lot up in the air. It's going to be so fast and furious. That's one factor. The new CBA, that's one factor. Where is the competitive balance tax, and how much are teams, like the Padres, who would pay presumably a stiffer penalty this year or going over this year than they did last year, because it would be their second year in a row. There's just so much going into it that I'm highly uncomfortable getting too far into my predictions while still trying to say, hey, this is what I've heard.
Right. Okay. So just to confirm again, with the whole outfielders, they think with cost, production, what they think he'll bring, that Suzuki is the guy that they would probably most be, wanting to target.
My sense is that that would be a excellent outcome, or they believe that would be an excellent outcome. I honestly, I don't know how likely that is, in that what you hear is that the Giants are his number one choice.
Okay. All right. Moving to the DH, obviously, with the universal DH being implemented, Nelson Cruz is obviously the big name that comes up. There's other options out there, but let's say the Padres want that 1 year deal with Nelson, or maybe they want 2 years. Let's just say 1 year though. How do you know how much money they're comfortable with that? 12, 13 million, 15 million. Where do you see them?
I don't know what their ceiling on that is, but the numbers that you say are the numbers being put out there. I also don't know anymore how serious they are about him. I'm not saying that they're not, but that's quite the investment, since he's not going to play the outfield for you more than, super seldom. So that would be quite the investment, and it would actually surprise me. I think that it's a possibility, but it would surprise me.
Okay. And now, obviously, trade market, I think, Will Myers is obviously easier to trade than Hosmer. I'm in the camp that you don't trade him. I think you just go for it. I mean, it's the longest tenured Padre, fan favorite, through the ups and downs. I think just the connectivity to us. He's been here through all of 2016 and 2019 and 2018. And I think that would just be a great story if they could finish it off with Myers in a Padres uniform. Do the Padres lean towards wanting to keep him?
Yeah, if you had to choose one or the other, they leaning toward or against? Yeah, they would. AJ Preller doesn't care about the good story. I love that you do, and I certainly do. I think everyone knows it like Will, and that I respect him, and I think that he, certainly can be. And a lot of people in baseball think that this guy still hasn't reached his potential. So absolutely, he is both the easiest guy to, trade big guys that make 20 million plus. He's the easier one to trade. There's 1 year left on the contract. He obviously has performed better. And then he's the easiest guy to keep too, right? For some of the reasons that you mentioned, and, production and all that. So Will, by the way, you say he's fan favorite, and that's great. I'm not going to argue with that. I think that Will owes a debt of gratitude to Eric Hosmer because Eric Hosmer has become the lightning rod. And I think that people also know that I've spent a lot of time at least trying to be fair, if not sticking up for, trying to be fair to Eric Hosmer. And I think that a lot, it's like, man, that guy can't take a step without some Padres fans getting on him. And I think they forget that he changed the culture of the Padres, and that he has brought a lot to this team. And that moves like that, go back and read some things about teams that have won championships, and how things change over the years. And when a move looks bad in 1 year and looks good in the other year, and it definitely looks good if a team wins a championship. And I get it. I really do. But I think it's unfortunate what has happened with Eric Hosmer.
Yeah, I think, look, I've said this on my podcast, YouTube show. People know that I'm not the biggest fan of keeping Hosmer with Christopher Russo earlier this week. Russo, he said on the Darren Smith show during Radio Row on Super Bowl week that the Padres should be patient with him. And Russo, after me going over stats and stuff, he kind of went onto my side and like, all right, if you want to trade him, trade him. But more, I want to kind of direct this question more about what fans think about your reporting with Hosmer. Because I think it's kind of funny. I think you're doing your job. You're trying to point out both sides. And I think some fans think that you're trying to defend Hosmer and do think, go overboard to defend him. What do you say to that?
I would vehemently deny that I go overboard to defend him.
Okay.
And if I defend him, I do believe that it's in the course of doing my job. Look, I'm human. I also have a heart, and I do think there's a lot of unfairness out there toward him. So there's that. I'll defend the way I do my job and that I'm fair. And I think that Eric thinks I'm fair. And I think that anyone that looks at it thinks I'm fair. And honestly, that's the absolute biggest compliment that I can give. This is a fun and challenging time to be a beat writer in this world, because everything you say, and I think, heck, it's a challenging time to be anybody on social media or anywhere, because anything you say is going to be construed one way or another. And if you have an opinion about how Kevin Acee does his job, then you're looking at everything I do through the lens of what your preconceived notion. And sometimes your preconceived notion is based on misinformation. Sometimes it's based on fact, and I'm not perfect. But sometimes that preconceived notion, which is going to color what you think of me, is based on a false narrative. And I see it all the time because obviously I'm on social media.
Right.
And so there's that.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, get that out there, because I wanted to be fair definitely towards you, because I know that you really do work hard reporting on the Padres and doing your job. So I just wanted to put that out there and give you an opportunity to talk about that. Moving to Joe Musgrove, last question here. Do you think that this is more of an in-season thing, an extension, both sides talking to each other on a possible extension just because of how short of a timeline they'll have to build their team?
Yeah, I think that you're on the right track there. There's just a lot to do. And Joe Musgrove may have been an off-season priority, or one of them to get done, maybe like during spring training or something, but you've just got a lot to do. So unless they were real close and none of us knew about it, then there is absolutely no reason why you don't renew him. And then you get something done after that. That probably, and I mean, I love Joe Musgrove. Love him as a person, love him as what I see him being a teammate. And like I said, was the best pitcher on that team. And if that's your number 3 pitcher, then you got a really good rotation. But probably smart of the Padres too. I mean, smart of the Padres. Maybe they'll, catch a break here. See what he's doing after 10 starts. That said, throws another no-hitter, has a 0.78 ERA. Might be out of their price range at that point.
Yeah, definitely. All right, before letting the audience go here, this episode is sponsored by Gaglione Brothers Cheesesteaks, famous subs cheesesteaks. They're located in Point Loma and Sports Arena, as well as Petco Park, down the third baseline, upper deck. So go get yourself some garlic fries and a cheesesteak today. Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to talk here on episode 117 of the Talking Friars podcast.
Hey, my pleasure, man. Really appreciate it. A lot of respect for what you do.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone. Have a good weekend.